Well, good morning. Um, uh, this morning we have Bill here with us and our online service, and we're going to do our Dharma talk. And he and I were just kind of joking around before I started the computer. So you're joining us in our moments of levitivity, I guess you could say. So anyway, let us begin by chanting Odaimoku 3 times together. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I got to think of that on oftentimes on the video. Since we've already done our service, I don't then begin the study recording with Odaimoku. And for people who join and watch it online, they may think that we haven't done anything and we're just starting to talk. So I wanted to get that in there. Okay, I'm going to pin my screen for the Dharma talk. Okay, so this morning, as I say, we have Bill, and it is September 8th, 2019. And I wanted to call attention to the calendar. We've got several special services coming up. Next week, we will do Tatsuno Kuchi. And as it so happens here in the United States, that falls almost on the same day as our September 11th anniversary memorials. So I sort of, in the past years, I've sort of combined those two together. Not that they're necessarily directly related, it's just that they are important events. And the calendar often doesn't provide enough Sundays for separating them. And since we had our service, special commemorative service last Sunday, this Sunday we're just kind of taking off and doing regular service. So I encourage you to look at the calendar. Next Sunday will be Tatsuno Kuchi. The following Sunday will be Ohigan, and that's where we pay a special attention to our practice of the 6 paramitas. And then the following Sunday after that will be the last Sunday of the month, and that is our time for prayer for overcoming illness. And then we start into October's calendar, and please look at that because we have Oeshiki, Sado Exile, and Halloween. So we don't do anything special for Halloween, but yeah. So that's October. So between now and the middle of October, we'll be pretty busy with our religious holiday celebration. In Christian religion, they have a liturgical cycle, and we don't really have a liturgical cycle. I've often thought about how one might go about implementing such a thing or offering such a structure. And our liturgy, our scripture, doesn't really conform to that kind of an annual kind of cycle. And really, in Buddhism, we are more of a, our annual calendar is filled up with special events where we commemorate events in the Buddhist life and events in Nichiren's life, and then astrological events. So and anyway, so I'm going to begin with the Dharma talk today, and today I'm talking about going slowly. And imagine, if you will, you're driving down the road, and in your car is a very fragile load, something you're really concerned about. So let's say you have a crock pot full of stew, some trays of food, and you're on your way to a potluck supper. Bill knows the hazards of driving with food prepared for a group. You used to do that as one of your side gigs, catering. So you know the situation. So you've got these items sitting perhaps in the front seat or the driver's side, or perhaps you've got them all laid out on the back seat. And so you're driving along, and you want your items to arrive unspilled and in good shape so that everyone will enjoy your contributions. All right. So you're driving along and you navigate your turns slowly because you don't want to spill anything. And you drive with perhaps greater caution, making sure that you have plenty of time to stop so that you don't slam on your brakes and have everything slide forward. And you notice that, you notice that people are whizzing around you perhaps when they can, and maybe even they're honking at you or they give you a dirty look. And even though you might be driving close to the speed limit, other people are, wanting to go around you. And speed limit, by the way, is not necessarily the speed at which you must drive. It is the stated speed of the maximum you should drive. So it's not wrong to drive under the speed limit, but it certainly irritates other people. So still the other drivers you sense are irritated at your slow and cautious pace. You know why you're driving with such great caution. The other drivers, however, do not. Imagine if they did know. Do you think they might be as irritated or as impatient? How many times do we become irritated when someone isn't going as fast as we think they should, or who isn't performing according to our standards? Are we like these drivers in our fictitious story? Do we take the time to consider there might be extenuating circumstances why someone is not doing things in a way to meet our expectations? It's easy to judge other people and their actions without considering. It's not easy to always be gracious and kind. It's easy to construct a story about the other person being slow, or stupid, or incompetent. It's not easy to remember that we do not fully understand all the circumstances in their lives. Quoting from the Lotus Sutra, "When we heard your first teaching, we did not know that teaching was an expedient, one expounded according to our capacities. Therefore, we believed and received that teaching at once, thought it over, and attained the enlightenment to be attained by that teaching." It's from Lotus Sutra, chapter 3. The Buddha's first disciples were guilty of making a false assumption. And that is that they thought that the Buddha had abandoned his way, had lost his direction, had given up on his effort to attain enlightenment when he took food and sat under the Bodhi tree. So their first assumption was that, he wasn't worthy of being a peer or even a teacher. So it's only with the teaching and their participation in the Lotus Sutra that they were able to learn the truth the Buddha only alluded to in his early teachings. So too, when we mistakenly make assumptions of others, we miss the truth of their lives. This causes us to suffer, as well as potentially causing them to suffer. We suffer when we think less of others or do not regard their lives and their inherent Buddhahood. We also diminish their lives and do not offer them the cause to awaken to enlightenment. Our daily relationships, no matter how brief or fleeting, are opportunities to not only practice Buddhism, but to allow others to connect with the Lotus Sutra. It isn't just what we say with our mouths, it is what we hold in our hearts. Again, in closing, quoting from the Lotus Sutra, the extinction of suffering is called the third truth. In order to attain this extinction, the 8 right ways must be practiced. Freedom from the bonds of suffering, that is, from the illusions, is called emancipation. And that's also from chapter 3, the Lotus Sutra. So, that's the end of the prepared Dharma talk. And unpin my video so that we are both, okay. All right, so Bill, I warned you I was going to call you first.
When you were giving the talk, I was thinking about being a teacher, how I encounter things when people fill in. If I pause for just a second to think of the best way to explain something, many will interject very quickly because they want to fill in the blanks, the pause, and most of the time they're wrong. Now, since I wasn't trying to put myself, the way to flip that around to have that apply to me rather than how I would apply it to what happens to me with other people is if there is a pause and I fill in the blank myself, that I'm not necessarily filling the blank in correctly. So I'm setting myself up for a misinterpretation rather than letting the teacher pause, and there's a reason for the pause. And, it should not be filling in the blanks because that causes mental confusion right there. So that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, yeah. As I read that, I think about some people I've known, and perhaps even to a degree myself, how autism. I mean, we talk about autism, or it's certainly part of the conversation, and we, have learned. Hopefully, we're learning as a society to be more gracious and to allow more space for people who relate to situations differently, who communicate differently, who might on surface appear normal. And really, I mean, it's not that they're not normal in their behavior and in their processing. I mean, they're normal, but we're hopefully we're learning to allow space for different ways of processing. It's like I drive now. I purposely try not to drive during busy periods when say like during rush hour, when I know that people are in a hurry and traffic's going to be a little bit heavier. And I do drive a lot more cautiously. And part of that is just vision. Up until my recent eye surgery, I really didn't have much peripheral vision, and certainly we did not drive at night. And I would explain to some people that I just can't I can't drive at night. I'm not doing that. And it was difficult. I could sense it was difficult for people to accept that. Not that they were necessarily intentionally being disrespectful or or not nice, but it wasn't their normal.
Right.
And it's like we expect people to talk. We expect people to be outgoing. I mean, that's the normal expectation, is that everybody will be outgoing and and will respond to stimuli the way that we're familiar with. And for many people with various levels of autistic spectrum and Asperger's spectrum, so like myself, I've never really processed humor. I don't. It's to me, I just don't really relate to it. I don't understand it. I mean, yeah, I can pick it apart and say, okay, well, this, and this. But it just doesn't elicit anything from me. It's sort of like, okay, well, yeah, so I'm, sort of what's the slang term for the person who just doesn't find things funny?
Curmudgeon.
Yeah, or else there's,
that might be a little extreme.
Yeah, stick in the mud, or it's like the party pooper. And then it's like I when there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of varying emotions, I can't deal with that. I can't process it, and so it's uncomfortable for me, and I don't want to be around it. And if I'm forced to be around it, I tend to withdraw because I just cannot I can't do that. And I mean, I've always known that. I've never had a word for it. Having a word for it doesn't make it necessarily any better. But what helps is I just avoid those situations because other people can't in the midst of a party, other people are really not prepared to deal with someone who is struggling with, relating to things going on, because they're at the party,
Right.
they're having fun, and to diminish their fun intentionally and try to understand someone else is a real struggle for some people. I get that. It's like, I'm okay with it, and so I just don't go. And then people want to know. I know somebody the other day asked me. They asked me if I had gone to the state fair, and then they'd asked me if I had gone, and then they asked me if I would have felt comfortable or safe going, and not safe like mass murder or anything, but emotionally safe. And I thought that was really cool. No, I did not go, and that's the reason why. Is because it's just too many people, and I wouldn't emotionally feel safe. It's like, where do I go with all those people? So that's me, and I just thought it was really cool that somebody asked that question that way. So yeah. And you, Bill, how about you? And you don't have to be real personal here, because this is recorded.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 things that actually came to mind. I guess the first one, when you mentioned the way people process information differently, is there was a doctor that was ADD, and while that might have caused some struggles with medical school, but he did well. He wound up in the emergency room, which is perfect for somebody. He could handle jumping from one severe injury to another. And if you think about it, they would have spent a whole, probably his first 25 years of life trying to cure him of the ADD.
Mm-hmm.
And it became perfect for his. That would drive me nuts. You don't want me to do an operation on you, but I'd be a much better surgeon, because I could just sit down there and do that one thing and stay concentrated on it for an hour. And I would get annoyed if I had to stop that and jump to another thing very quickly. So we have to have some sort of thing for people to be able to process information and get into things where their different processing works, because we're not all bankers.
Yeah.
It seems like that's what we were trying to get people to. If that's not the job you're in, you're not going to make it in Charlotte anyway. I mean, make it at some sort of higher level.
Yeah, and socially.
Yeah.
Socially,
you have to golf.
Yeah, and they're different, and some of those things just are not possible for some very intelligent, very qualified, very superior people. Your example, when you were saying that, it's like, having been a chaplain in the emergency room, seeing people. I mean, and another thing is they don't have to stop and relate to people.
Right.
In the patient room, the doctor is expected to relate to the patient. Now, not all doctors can.
Right.
Not all doctors want to. It's a complicated issue. Some just aren't capable. And so how do and yet their job requires it. So how do you deal with that? And that's one issue. But yeah, in the emergency room, for someone with ADD who's just like, and you don't have to relate to people. The ED doctor doesn't really. I mean, most of the time the person, I won't say most of the time, that would be incorrect, but much of the time the doctor doesn't have to spend any time with the patient. The nurse does.
Right.
The doctor's going on to another one. And usually it's not just one doctor, it's a team of doctors, because that's the makeup or the operation in an emergency department is you've got a whole slew of people coming in. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
And the other thing, when you mention the groups of people, because we find, and we might share this, I find dealing with people exhausting. It's not that I don't like it, and it's not that I don't get some rewards for it. And I actually deal with people, if I'm in a gas station, I will talk to the cashier, and I will have these conversations with them.
Good for you.
But it's one of the things that I will, you know, I have learned one-on-one and I teach one-on-one. So I just, high school was a disaster for me. The Army was actually good because once I got out of basic and all that, it was all my job in intelligence was basically 2 or 3 people in the classroom at a time. The classes were big. I mean, the class was big. The classrooms were very small and almost one-on-one. And I thrived. It's the same way I teach. The thing about that is when it's one-on-one all day long, it's very intense and it is exhausting. I like it. It's the only way I would teach. I do not do group lessons or classes, but it's emotionally, it's draining. You know, after about 8 one-on-ones like that and trying to do, you know, a good job, it's pretty intense that way.
Yeah.
But it's easier for me one-on-one than it is a group of 20 people. For 1 hour would drain me more than one person one-on-one for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah, it's you know, as a chaplain, a lot of our work is one-on-one, and it's interesting, you know, because as a chaplain, when you're in a group setting, there's a whole lot of dynamics that if you know that if you're a good chaplain, or if you're trying to be a good chaplain, let me put it this way: if you're trying to be an effective chaplain rather than good, an effective chaplain. Really? Then you really, you know, when you go into the room and you enter and it's a group, you have to really process, okay, you're there for the patient. Are the rest of the people going to allow you to be there for the patient? You need to help them understand that you're there for the patient. Now, you're not there to exclude them.
Right.
But you are there for the patient primarily, and everyone else, to a certain degree, is ancillary, you know, to that. It's not excluded, and they're not irrelevant. It's certainly not irrelevant.
Right.
And so, how do you navigate that? Who's the center? Who drives this group? You know, not necessarily the leader, but who's the emotional driver or motivator or mover in this group? Who dictates what the group talks about, how the group responds, you know, how the group expresses their emotions either individually or as a group, you know, and that may not be necessarily the husband, you know. You know, it's not necessarily the wife. You have to sort that out. And sometimes there's cultural influences. You know, with many cultures, women just don't count. And yet, you know, many times the woman is the stronger party. You know, the emotional strength of the group. So there's a whole, you know, dynamic there to sort out. And, you know, if the group won't allow you to talk to the patient, how do you communicate with the patient and find out, do I need to come back another time when the group's not there? You know, so there are many dynamics to sort out. So yeah, in the hospital, it's, you know, after a day of visiting patients, it's very tiring. I mean, you learn to you know, compartmentalize. I mean, you go from one patient, and, you know, we go through this routine of foaming our hands and cleaning them when we exit the room, and then before we enter the next room, we foam our hands and clean them again. And in that process, you're sort of closing the door and foaming your hand of the patient, not only the germs, but the patient, and you foam your hands to enter, clearing your mind and cleaning out all the stuff so you go in empty for the patient. And then at the end of the day, after you've done all that, they ought to sort of collapse in on you because you have to document all your visits and, you know, all that stuff. And so, yeah, it's, you know, it can be, it's a challenge and interesting thing. And I thrive in it. I enjoyed it. I hope I did good. I feel that I provided support in appropriate ways, and yeah, you have to rest and recharge. And when I was a resident, you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes, and there's not a whole lot of time to rest, because when you're not in the hospital working, you've got research you got to do, and reports you got to write, and verbatims you got to present, and I found that I was not walking as much in the neighborhood there, and the neighborhood there,
Right.
in Charlotte,
Yeah.
and I dawned on me that I need to get out and walk, because that's one way how I process all this stuff, how I
Yeah.
rejuvenate myself. I mean, it's not that I do anything when I'm walking. It's just that, it allows me to rejuvenate and recharge my spiritual energy in a way that nothing else does. So, yeah.
That's me and trail running in particular, and the bicycle's kind of a different thing. The trail running is definitely more of the same, and I do all of my things with no music, because that's my respite from music. Because even if you do what you love, you need time away. It's the same, the trials and tribulations of things. If I was that, you don't realize that people go through, like with martial arts stuff now. And then when I teach an exercise class, there are times when you are just hoping that people do not know. I'll go in there sore from my own workout, and some of this says, so does everybody know these exercises? And then they will need a demonstration. I'm like, and for all that is decent in the world, do not make me move. So while you're doing what you love, there are just times when it's just
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I know, especially when you're overnight on call at the hospital, and it's unrelenting for most of the night, if not all the night.
Yep.
You get pages. ATC 1 is adult trauma 1, which means everybody in every discipline in the hospital is present in the emergency room. So that means the chaplain has to go, and sometimes it tells you, by air, which means they're coming in by helicopter, and they'll give you a timeline, or they're coming by vehicle. If they're just coming by ambulance, they'll say ATC 1 5 minutes, or ATC 1 by air 15 minutes. And it's like, when you got a 15-minute one, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go grab a soda real quick, sit down and breathe, and then I'll run to the emergency.
Did you find military experience to help doing that? Because that's exactly what I learned in the Army, is if you have any downtime at all, you take it, because you don't know when the next second of downtime is going to happen.
Yeah, no, not, I mean, I guess it did, but it was so far removed from my Marine Corps experience. I mean, yeah, I mean, when I was in the Marine Corps, I working on the flight line with the jets, I fall asleep on the flight line. The jets are revving their engine and roaring away and making all kinds of noise, and I just, it's not my problem. I already okayed the radar system. We've already pulled all our tags and signed off on everything, and I'm gonna, I just sit there on the flight line and go to sleep, because there's nothing for me to do. Sun is coming up, it's hot, the engine's roaring, and it's like, no, I'm going to sleep. So I guess maybe subconsciously I did, but it's like math class. Okay, math class in high school. I'm going to sleep because I already know this. So yeah. Yeah. So we'll wrap it up here. And you have any final thoughts or anything about?
Yeah, actually, when you brought it up, one of the best teachers that I had at the last school that I went to in the Army, there was a guy who had said, "Do not nod off in my class." He said, "If you get tired, I want you to put your head down And when you're ready to come back to class, you put your head up. And, you know, I was the first one to call on, I was the first one to call him out, not call him out on it, but I actually did it because, you know, the guy is not going to tell me anything I can't do. And you know what? You're down for about 5, 10, 15 seconds. And I was right back up. And his classes, because we're up for 24 hours sometimes when you go to the classroom, and it's an 8-hour class. And I'm like, you know, I actually got something out of this. So there's something to be said for that rest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's you know, in Shingo Dojo, you know, the final monastery stay. You know, if you nod it off while you're in a, you know, 3 hours, you know, classes were 3 hours, and you know you'd sit there, you know, like this. Well, you can't see, but I'm sitting, you know,
Right.
in the traditional martial arts, you know, samurai with the feet underneath you and stuff like that. And you're sitting there and you sit like this. And if you fall asleep, the instructors would come and grab you by the front and haul you off. Yeah, you know, just
Very un-Buddhist.
yeah, drag you across the floor. It's like, you know, I'm not gonna let that happen to me. You know?
No.
You know, it's okay if the Japanese people, but you know, it's like, you know, when you're not Japanese,
That's right.
you
Yeah.
know, it's like they already think you're worse than they are, and it's like you
Right.
don't want to give them any evidence, you know? And so you have to be a little bit better or a lot better in
Right.
order to even be considered, you know. So yeah, as hot as it was and as sore as my feet were, it's like, there's no way I'm going to fall asleep.
There you go.
So anyway, yeah. Well, Bill, thank you very much.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
for the folks who are watching this online, thank you very much. And hopefully you got something out of it. And if you'd like to make a donation to the temple, please feel free to do so. We could use your support. All right. So let us close by chanting Odai Moku 3 times together. Namu Myo Renge Kyo. Namu Myo Renge Kyo. Namu Myo Renge Kyo. Thank you very much. Thank you.